Everyone, we've already finished the discussion of Civics Chapter 2, what is democracy, why democracy. So I finished the whole chapter, we've discussed the chapter, and I've also, much earlier I had uploaded the worksheet, and I've also now forwarded the answers and explained the same. In case you have any problem, please get in touch with me. Today we're going to, I will be explaining to you the question, answers and keywords of History Chapter 1, the French Revolution. Remember, History Chapter 1, the French Revolution, and Civics Chapter 2, what is democracy, why democracy, are the chapters which will come for your unit test 1. So in the coming week, I will be explaining, or rather, and of course get in touch with me in case you have any problem. Most of my material is available on the app, but in case there is a problem in the updation, then you will find everything in Google Classroom and YouTube playlist form 9. In case there is any problem, I will keep sending you the links. So let's start with the keywords. A livre, which is unit of currency in France, which was discontinued in 1794. Clergy, group of persons invested with special functions in the church. Clergy is also the first estate. Second estate is nobility, and third estate would be the common man. Tithe, a tax levied by the church comprising 1/10 of the agriculture produce. So tithe is basically a tax which is taken by the church. Taille or tile, tax to be paid directly to the state. This is the tax which was collected directly by the government. Subsistence crisis, an extreme situation where the basic means of livelihood are endangered. Subsistence crisis happens when people cannot, they have no food to eat, they have no money to buy that food, and there's starvation, and this also angers the people. So this is what was happening in France, and people were fed up with their government. Anonymous, one whose name remains unknown. We probably came across this word in the chapter. If we didn't, it's a word you can use. A chateau, castle or stately residence belonging to a king or a nobleman. A manor, an estate consisting of lord's land and his mansion. A manor would be in the countryside. Lord's lands with his lands. Treason, betrayal of one's country or government. Negroes, a term used for indigenous people of Africa south of the Sahara. It is a derogatory term, not in common use any longer. So kindly do not use this word anymore. However, you will write this term when you're writing about the condition of slaves in France and how France abolished slavery, then once again introduced it. Emancipation, the act of freeing. The act of freeing who? Basically the act of freeing the slaves. Convent, building belonging to a community devoted to a religious life. Now, who ascended the throne of France in 1774? In 1774, Louis XVI of the Bourbon family ascended the throne of France, or the Bourbon dynasty. He was the king of France in 1774, a few years before the revolution breaks out. Why did France have an empty treasury? France had an empty treasury because long years of war had drained the financial resources of France. Added to this was the cost of maintaining an extravagant court at the immense palace of Versailles. So basically this question is saying that why did France not have a lot of money? Remember, there's subsistence crisis, people don't have money, the government itself doesn't have money, and that's why it's taking a lot of taxes from the poor people who anyway don't have any money. So there's a lot of poverty. But why is France so poor at this time? The reason is because France was maintaining a very extravagant court, spending a lot of money there. Also, France helped the 13 American colonies gain their independence from the common enemy, Britain. Now remember, France and Britain were always, or France and England were always daggers drawn. They were always enemy. So Britain had control of America. They had colonized America. And now there are 50 states, but earlier when there were 13 colonies, they wanted to get freedom from Britain, and France is the one which helps these American colonies get freedom from Britain. But this war drained France. And whoever lenders who gave credit began to charge 10% interest on loan. Now 10% interest on loans is a lot. Who are these lenders? These are the rich people, rich merchants who were anyway trying to help the government and give it money. They said, we want our money back, and you have to give back this money with a lot of interest. How was the system of estates in French society organized? The system of estates in the French society was divided into three. The first estate was the clergy or the religious men, the second estate was the nobility, and the third estate were big businessmen, merchants, court officials, lawyers, peasants, artisans, laborers, servants, etc. So notice in the third estate how you have rich people as well as poor people. Which were the two taxes levied by the church? Levied means which were taken or So the two taxes levied by the church were tithes and tithe. So tithes were taxed from peasants comprising 1/10 of the agricultural produce. So the agricultural produce 1/10 had to be paid, and tithe was a tax which had to be paid directly to the state. Example for salt and tobacco. What was the subsistence crisis? I already told you in the keyword subsistence crisis is when people are not being able to fulfill their basic needs, and especially regarding food. The population of France rose from 23 million to 28 million between 1715 and 1789. This led to an increase in demand for food grains because the population has increased. Of course, they will need more food, more mouths to feed, because there are more mouths to feed. The price of the bread rose rapidly, so food became expensive. Most workers and laborers were employed where the owner fixed their wages, but their wages did not keep pace with the rise in prices. Now, most of the people were getting some wage, some money for their work, but the speed or the rate at which the prices of the food increased, their wages could not keep up with it. Things became worse when drought or hail reduced the harvest. Now these natural conditions, drought is a lack of rain, and hail is hailstorms, falling of hail. Now when these things started happening, natural calamities, whatever standing crop there was, that got destroyed, and because there was no water, there could barely be any crop. So all of this together led to the subsistence crisis, which is an extreme situation where the basic means of livelihood are endangered. Name the philosophers and their books which inspired the French middle class and their privileges. So we know the middle class, which is so basically the middle class is going to be a part of the third estate. I showed you in third estate there are rich people, educated, and also very extremely poor, illiterate people. Now these rich people are like lawyers, merchants, doctors, teachers. They are going to be the middle class. Now this middle class is literate. They're going to have ideas and they're going to read various books. So they are going to be inspired by some philosophers. So philosopher John Locke sought to refute the doctrine of the divine and absolute right of the monarch in his book, Two Treatises of the Government. So John Locke wrote the book Two Treatises of Government, and in his book he said that, listen, you don't have to obey your king. He doesn't have any divine right, or he has not been appointed by God to rule, and the king has no right to have absolute authority over us, which means the king can't do as he wants. Now another person was Montesquieu, and he wrote in The Spirit of the Laws, he said that there should be a division of power within the government between the legislature, executive, and the judiciary. This is something you must have studied in Form 8 Civics, where there are three organs of the government in India: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The reason they are divided is so that power is not based in any one person or any one body, and they both, all three of them work with each other as well as against each other in the sense of checks and balances, and especially the strongest which has checks against legislature and executive is the judiciary, the court. So in case any minister, any executive person does wrong to us, we can always go to the judiciary. A third philosopher was Rousseau. Rousseau had this idea of the social contract where he mentioned the principles of democracy. In Rousseau's social contract, he meant to write in his idea that the government and the people sign a contract where the government would take care of the people and be responsible to the people, whereas the people in return would listen to the government and provide it with funds. What did the members of the Third Estate demand? The members of the Third Estate demanded that voting be conducted with the assembly as a whole, whereas each member would have a vote. This was rejected by the king. We've done this while we were looking at the chapter where I told you that earlier voting used to happen on the basis of the estate. So imagine the three estates are together, first estate, second estate and third estate. Each estate will have one vote each, right? Now, which two estates are friends? The first estate and the second estate. So, they would always come together, one vote each. 1 plus 1 is 2. Whereas the third vote of the third estate would always be neglected. Now, the new demand of the third estate is no. Organs or estates should not have one vote each, but members of that estate should have one vote each. They say this because in the first estate there are 200 members. In the second estate, there are 200 members. But in the third estate, there are much more individual members, and thus the third estate could have an upper hand. What was the tennis court oath? The third estate started a protest against the privileges by birth. They met in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the ground of Versailles. So basically they protest that they want each of the members to have the right to vote, and when the king does not agree to this, they walk out of the Estates General and they then later meet at an indoor tennis court in the ground of Versailles on 20th June 1789. They declared themselves a National Assembly. So this new parliament is now called the National Assembly, and they swore not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution of France and would limit the powers of the monarch. So they decided that we are going to now limit the powers of the monarch, start something called as constitutional monarchy, where the monarch doesn't have such absolute powers, and they said that we will draft a constitution and we will stay in this tennis court till everything is done. What happened on 4th August 1789? On the night of 4th August 1789, the Assembly, the National Assembly, passed a decree. A decree would be an order abolishing the feudal system of obligations and taxes, which means they say we are not obliged anymore to pay taxes to the rich people, to the nobles and to the church. Members of clergy were also forced to give up their privileges. Tithes and taxes were abolished and land owned by the church was confiscated. So they take away all the land of the church. They say, no, you are very exploitative. You can't be taking taxes for us and have all the lands to yourselves. This is not fair. What was the great fear? In the countryside, rumors spread from village to village that the lords of the manors had hired bands of brigands who were on their way to destroy the ripe crops. Now see, people in France are anyway suffering. There is subsistence crisis. They don't have any money. Food is very expensive. They are dying of hunger and they are angry. Now to add to that, there's a rumor that all the rich lords, they are sending people to destroy whatever little crops there are. Remember, it makes no sense, but this is just a rumor. But rumors spread like wildfire and they make people scared and they anger them. So these feared people, they took their hoes and pitchfork and they went and started attacking all the noblemen. They raided their houses and they started rioting against the king. They looted the hoarded grain and burnt down documents of records of manorial dues. So whatever hoarded and stored grain there was, they looted all of it from the house of the nobles, and whatever documents there was saying that which peasant owned how much money or whatever, they burnt everything up. A large number of people migrated to neighboring countries. The reason they migrated was a lot of them were scared for their lives. Alright, we're going to stop here today. In the next lesson, we'll have a look at the rest of the questions. Thank you.